Friends, a reading from the psalmist. Listen now for a word from the Lord. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." Oh, how could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they said, tear it down, down to its foundations. O daughter of Babylon, you devastator, happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. Holy words, holy wisdom. Thanks be to God.
In line at a local coffee shop. Behind me in line, two women. They were both good friends. I caught on to this right away. And as we waited together for coffee, one of the women said to her friend, I want to know, after we get our drinks, should we talk inside or outside on the patio? Her friend considered the question for a brief moment and finally shared back, I tell you what I really need to do today is just vent. So what do you say we go outside to the patio? Have you ever just needed to vent? You know what it's like to need to have to sometimes vent. I know what it's like to have to vent, and I think God too knows what it's like for humans having a need to just vent. I recall being in graduate school in an Introduction to Old Testament survey course, and it was taught by a Yale PhD. Her name was Ellen Davis. A short little spunky woman, and she's written a number of books on the Psalms, including a great one called Getting Involved with God. And she claims that there's an entire genre of biblical literature that can be described as holy venting. And Psalm 137, according to Ellen Davis, is a great example. I recall when she was lecturing on Psalm 137, she took her fist in one hand and then opened the palm of her other hand, and she said, Psalm 137 reminds us all that God can take it. God can take it. The root of the psalmist's venting, you'll recall, is that God's people were living in exile. The Babylonians had burnt down the city of Jerusalem, and God's people were very, very down. They had taken their harps, and they had hung them on the willow trees. Their captors mocked them, "Sing us a song of Zion." They responded, "We do not feel as though we want to sing beautiful songs about God in this foreign land. Our entire world has been taken from us." And that's when the psalm moves into patio territory. The psalmist then gets so upset and wanting revenge, even says back to God, "I wish you would just take these people, their infants, and bash them up against the rocks." Whoa. Talk about a holy vent. And as we consider this whole event, we do so, and I can tell by the reaction to Jim's scripture reading, our initial reaction is a sense of discomfort about this. It kind of offends our Sunday morning pious sensibilities, does it not? But I must say that there is a place where I personally resonate with this psalm, and I think perhaps we all can. I don't mean to overly spiritualize this text, as this particular event happened at a particular time in the history of God's people, but I do wonder if you and I know what it's like and how it feels to have our own world taken from us. I remember when nations wanted to work together toward peace. I remember when, politically speaking, you could agree to disagree and there wouldn't be any violence. Or I remember when churches and synagogues and other houses of worship were places where peace was respected, and now they are places of bloodshed. You ever had your world taken from you? And it isn't just about the broader world, it can be very personal too. I remember when in my grief that person was still part of my world. Or I remember when my world was so different, when I had my health or this particular relationship, and now you don't have that as part of your world, and it feels as though the world has been taken from you that you once knew. And in those seasons in our lives when we feel as though the world has been taken from us, our response to vent, to share with God our hurt and our frustration. For the good news of Psalm 137 is that indeed God can take it. God can take it. And the God who is willing to take it might just also be positioned to move us forward into our unknown future. I was reading a lectionary blogger this past week, and she was talking about those friends that we have in our lives, or maybe family members, to whom we know we can just vent. And she said, consider the attributes of that person. They are probably trustworthy. They are probably non-judgmental. They're probably very honest people. They're probably people who love you unconditionally. And if it is true that our God in heaven is one to whom we can vent, then those same attributes may very well be true of God. Non-judgmental, honest, present with you, unconditionally willing to hear you vent, and maybe willing to get involved in the future as you walk forth. You know, the place in the New Testament that reminds me the most of Psalm 137 was Jesus' parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. You remember that one? The Pharisee comes into the temple, and the Pharisee is very much hiding behind his piety, and he prays this very flowery prayer before God, kind of keeping a safe distance from God. And then there's this other man who comes in, the tax collector, who just throws himself down on the ground and he beats his chest in honest, authentic prayer. And Jesus goes on to say, it was the tax collector, not the Pharisee, who moved forth justified in the eyes of God. A God to whom we can vent may just be a God who will be with us going forward. For when you do vent to a friend or family member, why after the vent does it feel so good? Yes, you have gotten something off of your chest, perhaps, and there's a freedom to it, but there's something more, I would argue. And that something more is that same loved one, that same friend or family member, having heard your vent, is still with you, is going to walk with you into the unknown future. And knowing that there is a person who can help, that can trust and be trusted, is powerful, powerful. I'll close with a final detail about this text. If you've ever been in a Bible study with me before, you know that I am very much a proponent of a biblical interpretation strategy that the ancient rabbis living around Jesus' day often used, and it's called first use. This is when a word comes along in the Bible, particularly early on in the Old Testament, and then you allow that word, after it has first been used, to continue to enable your interpretation as you move forth into the New Testament. Well, God's people of old, in their venting and in their hurt, they hung up their harps. But do you know where again in the scripture that harps become theologically very, very important? It's actually in the book of Revelation. For we're told over and over again that harp music is the music of heaven. You know what I learned from that? There will be seasons in our lives when we feel as though the world has been taken from us. And when we feel that way, it is okay to vent to God and to hang up our harp and to say, today I do not feel like singing. But don't be surprised if that same God to whom you vent grabs your harp from that tree and takes you forward into a better day here on earth, and yes, even beyond.